Hello, my name is Sydney McLeod, and this is my 1000 Minds presentation for business analytics. The decision that I made throughout the intro project and will be making throughout the course of this project is a decision between restaurants. These restaurants are Outback Steakhouse, Capital Prime, and the Cheesecake Factory. In this section, I will also be adding the restaurants Texas Roadhouse, Bonefish Grill, and Ruth's Chris Steakhouse. By utilizing 6 sets of criteria amongst the many other options of 1000 Minds, I will be making my decision of which restaurant I prefer. Because I am gluten-free, there will be a criteria of gluten-free options as well. Not only this, but I will likely include pricing and maybe even proximity to me. A breakdown of why I make my final decision and how is listed in the screenshots to follow. So first we have setup, and the model name that I chose was Restaurant of Choice because that is what my decision is based upon. For the activity mode that I chose, I didn't want to just be limited to weighting the criteria or simply ranking the criteria. Instead, I wanted to be able to add in other factors as well, which is why I chose the selection activity mode for things such as gluten-free options and other factors. So the question at the decision step that I mentioned below, which is essentially the question that I answered throughout the 1000 Minds software, is which of these 6 restaurants do you prefer? So, in order to decide between these 6 restaurants, I had to develop criteria. So, the criteria that I focused on was price, location, value for money, seating availability, ambiance, and gluten-free trained staff. Price allowed me to determine what kind of an amount of money I was looking to spend and base that off of my particular situation. Location allowed me to determine how far I may have to drive for a specific restaurant based on what I was searching for. Value for money allowed me to determine if it truly was worth the price point that the restaurant offered. Seating availability also was important to me because this can be an issue sometimes. So, knowing whether I need a reservation no matter what to get in or whether it's first come, first serve, this is an important option when eating out. The ambiance, this is kind of what sets the mood on whether you are going out just for your standard dinner or whether you are going out for an anniversary. So, and it's all based on what kind of a night out you want, more fancy or more casual. So I chose ambiance because that's important to me as well. And then gluten-free trained staff, that is an important question to me because when I go into a restaurant, I want to know that the staff is trained in order to be able to order the food for me and ensure that it is safe so that I don't get sick because of my celiac disease. So all of these criteria are very important for me. So that's why I chose all of these criteria to determine as I make my steps to decide on a restaurant. Next, we have the alternatives. So all the alternatives that I talked about at the beginning of the presentation when I introduced it, we have Bonefish Grill, Capital Prime, Outback Steakhouse, Ruth's Chris Steakhouse, Texas Roadhouse, and the Cheesecake Factory. So I went through and I added all of these alternatives and I made sure to rank all of them based on price, on location, on value for money, seating availability, ambiance, gluten-free trained staff, and then I also added another factor, which was gluten-free options. So I went on their websites and I made sure on the pricing options, on the location in comparison to where I live, I ranked the value for money personally because I've eaten at all of these restaurants and I used a personal opinion for that. Seating availability, I used their websites as well to determine this. The ambiance, again, personal opinion here. Gluten-free trained staff as well. That was a personal opinion. I've been to many of these restaurants many times, and I have had a lot of experience with staff and how well trained they are gluten-free wise on their menu options. And then I also went on the website of all of these restaurants and determined the amount of gluten-free items that they have on their menu. So the next option that it took me through was all of the different questions to determine exactly the importance for me based on price, based on location, and that is what led me to getting the ranks of these different restaurants here. So, as you can see, Cheesecake Factory ranked first for me based on my preferences throughout the questions that 1000 Minds asked me to determine this decision for me. Cheesecake Factory is a 96.3% match for me, which makes sense because of their high amount of gluten-free options, because of their price point, and also because of their staff's ability to understand gluten-free. It is not mentioned on here in the final ranking, but that was also an important thing for me as well. It looks like the Ruth's Chris Steakhouse ranked at 79.4% for me at second place, which makes sense because it also is the second highest menu with gluten-free options. So, what was my final decision and why? Overall, my final decision was to go with the Cheesecake Factory. I learned this through the questions that I was to answer to determine my preferences. As I answered these questions, I learned that while I prefer to be closer to home, I would rather go farther away for higher quality food for my money. While I completed these questions, I also learned that the Cheesecake Factory was a 96.3% match for me, while Ruth's Chris Steakhouse was 79.4% match for me. It offers less menu options and a very high price point, despite the food being high quality. Still, the Cheesecake Factory wins at being equally high quality while meeting at a middle ground for the price point. Not only this, but despite the long drive, the Cheesecake Factory offers me more menu items while eating a gluten-free diet, and I can trust their staff to understand gluten-free options and importance. This alone is means for me to make a trip out there. Not only this, but pairing this benefit with a medium price point and high quality food was what made me say yes to this specific restaurant. Despite this being one of my favorite restaurants anyways, what the program did for me was offer a reason as to why this may be based on criterion. Overall, this project allowed me to determine a question that I make very often and that we all make very often, but it allowed me to see why specifically I am more drawn to specific restaurants. And 1000 Minds is definitely a very strong piece of software that I will use in future decisions as well.